Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Last week, the Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal presented their annual list of economic freedom. For the 7th year running, the U.S. has dropped down that list, now residing at 12th most free economy in the world. While the U.S. used to be number 1, it is now behind Ireland at number 9. Yes, the same Ireland which was a vassal state of the Troika until mid-December, when it gained at least an appearance of economic sovereignty, which makes you wonder what exactly their idea of economic freedom is. Stacy.
Max, this is important to know because, of course, Davos has been happening this past week, and they're trying to deliver us economic freedom. I think what we're going to see from them and what Heritage Foundation and the Wall Street Journal, when they looked at Ireland, what they see is this, what Nigel Farage, UKIP MEP, said.
We are run now by big business, big banks, and in the shape of Mr. Barroso, big bureaucrats.
So true. It's fascinating how far down this league table the U.S. has plummeted. It's the only country that's actually dropping. The other ones are kind of in stasis to some degree or another. Only the U.S. is really, plummeting down this list.
Yeah, but like I said, I don't know if it's a bad thing in the way that they determine what economic freedom is. They don't care that Ireland was occupied by foreign banking powers until just a few weeks ago, allegedly. Now, I want to say that here in the UK, they're number 14 on this list, and they could be rising very soon if they determine economic freedom in the being occupied by banksters, because HSBC faces £70 billion capital hole, warns Hong Kong analysts. HSBC could have overstated its assets by more than £50 billion and ultimately need a capital injection of close to £70 billion before the end of this decade, according to an incendiary report published by a Hong Kong-based research firm, and the research firm is called Forensic Asia. This is £70 billion, which equals about $110 billion.
Who's our accountant?
E&Y?
KPMG?
No, actually it was KPMG. I believe from last year it was PwC.
Oh, so. PwC. Not KPMG? Not E&Y? Not Deloitte & Touche? Not Deloitte & Touche? Not E&Y? Not KPMG? Not PwC? They're all the same. It's one big acronym. You could just get rid of all those acronyms and replace it with F-R-A-U-D. Fraud. They're all the same. They all collude. They go to Davos and they collude, and they all work off each other's playbooks, and it's fraud.
The fraud that they found from Forensic Asia, and by the way, this is run by two guys named Thomas Monaco and Andrew Haskins. Thomas Monaco was a former New York Fed guy, and actually Andrew Haskins was an analyst at HSBC for 15 years. So what they found is they began its coverage of Britain's largest banking group with a sell recommendation, warning the lender had between $63.6 billion and $92.3 billion of questionable assets on its balance sheet, ranging from loan loss reserves and accrued interest to deferred tax assets, defined benefit, pension schemes, and opaque level 3 assets. This is the problem that we have with so much fraud built on top of fraud, that nobody knows what any of these books look like, and they get blessed by the likes of KPMG or PwC or Ernst & Young. Any of the accounting firms bless it and say this is okay, but they're looking at it and saying all those assets are overstated by a huge amount.
Well, no, the accounting firms that are left. Remember Arthur Andersen covered Enron's books, and then they were taken offline. This goes back to the crisis of 2008. And the too big to fail banks, of course, have gotten even bigger, because every time there's a crisis, they destroy one or two of the banks. Now, during the 2008-2009 period, it was Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers. What happened to the Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers businesses? They all were sucked up by the remaining banks, whether it was JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, took a piece of those businesses, and they become too big to fail. The way this was engineered is that they're all technically insolvent, but they have to put in, £70 billion worth of garbage that they have to keep on their books, listed officially according to KPMG. They're worth 100 cents on the dollar, even though they're technically worth 0. But they became the trash receptacle for the 2008-2009 period. It's in London. It's the biggest bank in London. London is the global center of financial fraud. So HSBC's bank is like JP Morgan's balance sheet in America. They have trillions of dollars worth of toxic debt they share with the Fed. Here, HSBC shares toxic debt with Mark Carney's Bank of England. So they're warehousing toxic debt. Now the forensic people in Asia are saying, oh my God, that's toxic debt. This bank is insolvent, technically, as it has been for 5 years, technically insolvent. If this push comes to shove, they will have a crash and then a bailout again, and the cycle will repeat itself. But don't be fooled. This is all baked into the cake. This is exactly what we predicted was going on. It's just exactly what I've been saying about HSBC, and now some Asian forensic accounting firm is saying, yes, Max Keiser is correct. They're insolvent. They're hiding a black hole of debt.
But the UK may celebrate the fact that they'll go up on Heritage and Wall Street Journal's list of economic freedom once they have to bail this bank out. Now, remember during the financial crisis when they were looking around all these governments of the world to bail out the banking system, they needed to raise some revenues as everybody lost their job and all the tax receipts declined. And HSBC threatened to leave London. Remember, they wanted to go base themselves in Hong Kong. And whatever sweeteners the UK government paid them to stay here, they've stayed here. And now it looks like a $110 billion black hole of debt in there could be the British taxpayer may have that. They may own RBS and HSBC, two of the biggest giant banks in the world of derivatives, the proud owners right here. Now, the note from Forensic Asia says, in our view, HSBC has not made the necessary adjustments during the quantitative easing reprieve. Rather, it has allowed legacy problems to linger as new ones in emerging markets gather pace. The result has been extreme earnings overstatement, causing HSBC to become one of the largest practitioners of capital forbearance globally. This charade appears to be ending, given how few earning levers remain besides selling off core elements of the franchise and the stringencies of Basel III compliance. Here you have it, that they're saying that, first of all, quantitative easing reprieve. We've all lost economic sovereignty by that regard. I mean, there's still a number one, Hong Kong, number two is Singapore, economic freedom, but we've all globally lost economic sovereignty to this. The big banks, big business, big bureaucrats who have been printing money for the bailouts of these banks. But despite all that printing, the hundreds of trillions of dollars of printing by central banks, despite all of that, they say that HSBC has this capital forbearance, that they've been lying, extreme earnings lies.
Oh, they've been lying about their revenues.
Yes.
They've been lying about their income. They've been lying about their balance sheet. They've been lying about their income statement. They've been lying about their liabilities. They've been lying about their involvement in laundering money for Hezbollah. They've been lying about their involvement in laundering money for Mexican drug cartels. They've been lying about their involvement in the American mortgage crisis and the dot-com crisis and the housing crisis. I would imagine if you asked the chairman and the president and the CEO of HSBC right now what they had for lunch, they would lie. They just had a bologna sandwich and they said, we just had a turkey sandwich. Because it's in their culture, it's in their DNA. They grew up liars, they are liars, they'll die liars. Their DNA, if you take it to another planet, another universe, another parallel dimension, you could sell it on the open market as DNA that's made of pure lies. Whatever value that has in a parallel universe, their lies, their DNA is made up of pure lies. You know, it's funny that they threatened to leave the UK if they were actually asked to obey the law. I mean, imagine Jimmy Savile. Here's a guy who committed pedophilia with over 400 children. And he's taken to the court, taken to the Old Bailey, and his defense is, if you prosecute me, I'm going to go to Switzerland. That's what HSB is saying. If you prosecute me and our scads and scores and hundreds of incidents of fraud, we threaten to leave the country. And the government says, oh no, we need your fraud to pay our political campaigns. Please stay. Cameron, you're a...
So
what a
Forensic
loser.
Asia says of their stated capital ratios that they would appear to be nothing more than a mirage. So that's what
I've been saying! It's a hologram of fraud! It has been for years! HSBC, there's nothing there except a lie! It's traded on the FTSE as a lie! If you want to invest in a lie, buy it. Buy it! My God! That's a lie! It's a lie! It's a lie! They're lying! There's nothing there! It's a piece of dirt! If you buy that stock, you're buying financial terrorism! Don't you understand that? Do you value your children at all? Or do you want to see them sent to a concentration camp? Wait, oh. I forgot, Dancing with the Stars is on. Never mind.
So the equivalent in the U.S. to this mirageist bank here in London is JP Morgan. So we're going to turn to a JP Morgan headline and their lies and what economic sovereignty really looks like. Los Angeles to consider cutting ties with JP Morgan. A Los Angeles councilman proposed Wednesday that the nation's second largest city consider ending tens of millions of dollars of financial ties with troubled JP Morgan Chase & Company. A motion introduced by Democrat Gil Cedillo seeks a review of city business with the nation's largest bank as well as an analysis of legal options to end those contracts. This is what real economic sovereignty looks like. In fact, if this passes, they should, in a real list by the Heritage Foundation, Los Angeles should top the list of that economic freedom.
Remember what Eric Holder said and did when Jamie Dimon was brought down in Washington for committing acts of economic fraud and terrorism. He said that we are unable to prosecute Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan here at the Department of Justice. This is Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, saying he is incapable of prosecuting terrorism in America. So why don't you just resign because you're sucking up too much oxygen?
The entire all the U.S. Attorney Generals. So the Preet Bharara, he said when he fined them $2 billion and a deferred prosecution agreement for their role in the Madoff Ponzi scheme, he said he had to think of the collateral consequences if a criminal case were brought, i.e. they can't do it because fraud is so endemic to the whole U.S. But here, Los Angeles is saying they could get rid of them. We're going to look at these contracts. Why do we want to do business with a fraudster? If they're committing fraud everywhere else, is it likely that we're going to be, presumably, they're committing fraud against us as well? Now, the mayor of Los Angeles, who is Eric Garcetti, he said that he hasn't reviewed this motion by the councilman, but he said, quote, "I want to make sure we are putting our money in a bank that does more good than harm." So I think it is a legitimate question to ask.
Well, why don't they just replace the stars on the American flag with Eric Holder getting Jamie Dimon's thumb up his schwing? I think that would be a much more accurate depiction of what's going on in that country. And you can't find another bank to find that's not part of this corrupt system. That's rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. They're all corrupt because they're all tied to the central bank, whether it's Janet Yellen or Mark Carney, who are tied to the Bank of International Settlements, and they're all basically corrupt. So they're all eating the same toxic stew, and they're all part of the same racket. It's like if you were going after the mafia, you just can't go after one part of the mafia. You have to go after the mafia as a racket. It's a racketeering.
Well, when you mention stew, of course, it makes me think of those Mexican drug cartels that HSBC does business with, and they would melt people down into a stew. And us doing business with them, we've turned ourselves into stew. We need to declare economic freedom, sovereignty, financial freedom and sovereignty from these banks.
Yeah, or how about a head sitting on a turtle, like on that show Breaking Bad? That would be a nice American flag. It would say a lot more than the stupid stars and stripes that went out of... Nobody believes that nonsense anymore. Well, we're out of time, Stacy. We must move on. Thank you.
Stay away from turtles with heads on the top.
Okay. Stay tuned for the second half, a whole lot more.
Welcome to the future.
The new year's here, so we've hit the road to focus on new technology. On this month's show, no party is complete without cool tunes. And we learn about the next industrial revolution that has the potential to save lives.
Technology update here on RT. We've got the future covered.
Hello, Tanya. Hello, dear. Well, tell me how you are, and my little grandson. Hello? Hello? We've been cut off. I accept it as an eco-village, but the spiritual side there is destructive. I tried to convince her, tried to prove that it was a sect, that it's dangerous, that she had to leave. It was as though she had lost her mind. She will come back, I know it, and I will wait, even if it means I must wait, until my dying day.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to the Pine Ridge in South Dakota and speak with Payu Harris. Payu, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Glad to be here, Max.
All right, this is a very exciting story. You want to make Bitcoin the sovereign currency of your Indian nation. Tell us about the plan.
Well, we feel the plan is pretty comprehensive, Max, and pretty simple. It's simply, educating people, raising the awareness level, so people understand what Bitcoin is and why they should use it. A lot of it's getting the merchants on board. And what's actually helping is some of the big department stores out here in the United States had a major breach of security. So what we're doing is we're using that to showcase the security features that Bitcoin provide. Pretty much, it's an awareness campaign.
Of course, when I first heard about this, it seemed remarkably appropriate for the indigenous people of America to embrace Bitcoin, because one of the features of the blockchain of Bitcoin is that all the contracts are embedded in the blockchain, and there's no ability to go back and change the blockchain, so people cannot claim that what was on the blockchain was not there to begin with. And I think what's going through a lot of people's minds is that the history of the American Army and the Indians is one of busted treaties. Treaties get broken all the time. This is the history that we've grown up knowing. So Bitcoin is really, in effect, a way to put all of those documents and legal documents into the transparent and irreversible blockchain. Your thoughts?
Exactly. You bring up a very good point. Ironically enough that you'd mentioned that, we're already starting to get some blowback from the tribal president's office. He had federal agents. Apparently he had a couple of FBI agents that told him that Bitcoin was illegal. I've assured him that it's not. I've shown him numerous news reports that show that it's not. But if you look at it from the aspect of broken treaties, I can understand why at the federal level there is this campaign to disrupt this program, because exactly like you said, you can't tamper with it. So you can't promise something and then not deliver. Once you send it, it's sent, it's good, it's done, end of story.
Again, going back into Indian history, there was not a concept going back a couple of hundred years of, let's say, private property as such. There was the communal property, there was the natural property of the earth that was shared communally, and the idea of having a monopolist come in or financial fraudsters arrive to disrupt the natural ecosystem was not really part of the DNA of the culture of India. Now here, of the Indians. Now here you have Bitcoin, which is almost a natural resource in itself that is self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways. So again, you're bumping up against two cultures here, but with Bitcoin on the side of the Indian culture, it seems like the balance of power can tip. I mean, to me, it seems like this is a beautiful marriage. Bitcoin and Indians. It seems like a match made in heaven for so many reasons, both current and historical. Your thoughts?
Definitely. You're definitely right on with that. I mean, we're talking about a major paradigm shift for Native American tribes, not the least being the fact that by having our own independent currency, that simply augments the sovereignty that we already have. So you have all these treaty obligations that the U.S., try to avoid, bringing up the fact that we have sovereign rights, to have our own currency, to employ Bitcoin and adopt it as our sovereign currency. That really showcases the treaty obligations that the U.S. have and their lack of follow-through. So they're scared. I mean,
right. So if I remember my grade school history books, there was a concept called manifest destiny that gave the U.S. Army the right to roll over the plains because it was their divine right. And it's almost like there was a story in the FT this week that talked about the divine right of bankers. So the Indian plight over these many decades and 100 years is the same plight that we all share, because the same arrogance, the same bankers, now with financial treaties of collateralized mortgage obligations and other dubious contracts, are rolling over the plains again. So there's a common cause we all have with India. Now I want to move on to the fact that you're looking at some altcoins, which would be part and parcel of the Bitcoin story. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Once we started the BTC Oyate initiative, we had a lot of people that came forward wanting to help. We had some coin developers that came in, and we've put together a alt currency of our own, and that is called Maza Coin. Now, Maza Coin, what's unique about it is one of the concerns about Bitcoin is there is the potential for the federal government to make a position of, well, you didn't start Bitcoin, you adopted it, so it's not really yours. So by implementing our own cryptocurrency that's based off of the, it's actually a hard fork off of Zeta Coin, but it's still an SHA-256 based coin, we do have a currency that we are developing ourselves. Our development team is working very hard on finishing that. We hope to have it launched by March. However, we are still going to have Bitcoin, you know, as part of the cryptocurrency environment. I'd really like to welcome all of the cryptocurrencies out there and have a place on the reservation for them. You know, maybe, you know, having our entire economic ecosystem, if you will, based off of cryptocurrencies. You know.
Yeah, you know, in this country, there's a debate between what's considered the public domain and the private domain. And you see this played out in the area of intellectual property. The MPAA in California believes that the public domain includes all works of art and creative works going back from the beginning of time and for the rest of time, and what they have is their perpetual copyright scheme. So they have no concept of a public domain whatsoever. Whereas the Indian culture, it's almost the diametric opposite. They only think, I mean, they think in terms of the public domain. That's their basis of their spiritual well-being, is to preserve the public domain. So do you see this adoption of cryptocurrencies and the Bitcoin nation as it evolves? Could your politics extend beyond just the politics of defending the land that's been stolen into other areas of political concerns, like, as I just mentioned, the intellectual property realm, et cetera? Are the Indian nations, are they becoming politically charged again with the presence of cryptocurrencies? Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I brought this up to our, the term is Iyapaha, and it's kind of like a tribal spokesperson. It's a traditional position, and our current Iyapaha is Chase Iron Eyes. And when I brought this up to him and explained it to him, he immediately got on board, immediately said, hey, this is something good for our people. This is something that we can really get behind. Same thing with my uncle, Floyd Hand. He saw the potential, you know, and he told me, he said, if this is good for our people, make it happen. I mean, nowhere in the history, I think, of finance has the common person had so much ability to get involved in a market like this. Like I said, this is the nerd's revenge. This gives it back to, in Lakota, it's called Ikchewichasha, which means the common man. So
okay, now you mentioned the Lakotas. You know, they also, the Lakota people had a silver coin at one point. It's a very popular mine, silver coin, with the idea being that it's a sovereign representation of the Lakota nation. And, but of course, silver prices and gold prices, as we now know, and another report in Germany detailing how these prices are manipulated. And again, you know, the white man, I hate to bring it down to this level, but I mean, this is historically the way these things have been debated, you know, uses bad paper, bad treaties in the form of naked short sales to destroy gold and silver prices, and Lakota Nation and everyone else gets screwed. So here you have a currency, the Bitcoin, or let's talk about the Maza coin for a second, because it falls into the category of pre-mined. Now, there's a bit of a debate about pre-mined coins. Of course, this would be, you mentioned the inner geek or the nerd's revenge. This is getting down even to another level of nerddom. But the pre-mined coins, why did you choose to go down that path versus a currency, let's say Bitcoin itself, where the mining goes on for another 50, 60, 70 years? Your thoughts?
Very good point. Now, let me, when we say a pre-mine phase, everyone thinks we're going to mine out like 50% of the coins. No, we're not. It's a very, very limited pre-mine. And what that's for is not everyone on the reservation has the equipment to actually get into mining. Not everybody has a laptop. So what we're going to do with this pre-mine is essentially kind of create a reserve of currencies. So if somebody says, somebody that might have like artwork for sale, they could technically mine and take part and get, be involved by being paid with Maza coin. If a tribal employee wanted to say, well, we want our payroll in Maza coin, it basically gives the tribe an already developed resource to use immediately. Now we are, in talks with the tribe's Economic Development Administration about setting up a mining operation, but as everyone knows, those can get really, really expensive if you want to be efficient.
Let me jump in. So we've only got about 15 seconds left. So if I get this correct, in other words, everything can be swapped for the Maza coin, whether it's artwork or home crafts, etc. So you're saying basically to avoid the problem of having hardware in place that is not really it's not available. But so there's a real practical need for the pre-mining, which I think I can understand. Payu, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on. Have you back on again soon.
Salamia Kola Doksha. Thank you, Max. Goodbye.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Payu Harris. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.